The gun was already on the table before anyone sat down. Jae-won Kwon placed it there himself, slowly, deliberately, the way a man places a crown rather than a weapon, and then he straightened his tie, pulled out his chair, and sat down across from the three men who had made the mistake of skimming money from his Lagos operation for the past 6 months. The room was silent. The kind of silence that has weight. Jae-won was 34 years old, Korean-born, Lagos-based, and built like a man who had decided very early in life that the world would bend to him rather than the other way around. He had sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that gave nothing away, and a stillness about him that made dangerous men nervous. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. In 12 years of running the Kwon import-export empire, legitimate on paper, terrifying in practice, Jae-won had never once needed to shout to be heard. He looked at the three men across the table, one by one, slowly, like a man reading a document he found disappointing. 14 million naira, he said finally. His accent was precise, Korean underneath, Lagos on the edges, the voice of a man who had lived in two worlds long enough to belong completely to neither. In 6 months. From 3 men I trusted with my distribution network. He paused. I want to understand something. Did you believe I would not find out? Or did you believe that when I found out, I would not care? Nobody answered. The gun sat between them like a full stop. Jae-won nodded slowly, as though they had said something reasonable. Leave the 14 million on my desk by Friday. Every naira. And then you will each spend the next 12 months proving to me, slowly, painfully, humbly, that you are worth keeping. He stood, buttoning his jacket with the calm of a man ending a mildly inconvenient meeting. Or you can make a different choice. But I would think carefully before you do. He walked out without looking back. His lieutenant, Park Sung-jin, sharp-faced, quietly ambitious, always one step behind Jae-won's left shoulder, fell into step beside him as they moved through the corridor. Will they pay? Park asked. All 3 of them, Jae-won said. By Thursday. He was right. He was always right. That was the thing about Jae-won Kwon. He did not guess. He calculated. He observed. He waited. And then he moved with the kind of precision that made people feel, afterward, that they had never really had a choice at all. His office on the 32nd floor of Kwon Tower in Victoria Island was a study in controlled elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos Lagoon. A desk of dark mahogany. No photographs. No personal items of any kind. The office of a man who had decided that personal things were liabilities. It had not always looked this way. 5 years ago, there had been a small cactus on the windowsill. A post-it note on the corner of his monitor that said, in loopy handwriting, "Eat something before 2 p.m. or I will personally walk in here with jollof rice and embarrass you in front of your investors." A second chair pulled close to his desk, where someone used to sit for hours, working quietly beside him, the only person whose presence did not feel like an intrusion. Her name was Adiz Okonkwo. Everyone called her Ada. And she had been gone for 5 years, 3 months, and, not that Jae-won was counting, because he absolutely was not counting, 17 days. He never spoke about her. He never allowed her name in meetings. He had deleted her contact from his phone approximately 9 times before accepting that deletion did not equal erasure. His new secretary was efficient and invisible, which was exactly what Jae-won had requested. She did not challenge him. She did not push back. She did not appear at his office door at 7:30 in the evening with a container of egusi soup and the announcement that a man who had not eaten since 6 in the morning was a danger to himself and others. She was perfect. He found her completely unbearable. On the morning that changed everything, Jae-won was not in a reflective mood. He was preparing for the Lagos Seoul Business Summit, an annual conference that brought together the most powerful African and Asian business figures in the country, and he had 17 things demanding his attention before 9 a.m. He moved through his morning with mechanical focus. Briefings, calls, documents, decisions. He did not think about Ada. He put on his best suit, charcoal gray, Korean cut, the one his mother had sent from Seoul with a note that said he needed to look less like a man planning a funeral, and he went to the summit. The venue was the Eco Hotel Grand Ballroom, dressed for importance. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors. The kind of air conditioning that made you forget it was 32 degrees outside. Hundreds of people in silk and linen, moving through the room with champagne glasses and carefully constructed smiles. Jae-won worked the room the way he worked everything, with surgical efficiency. He shook hands with ministers. He nodded at rivals. He said exactly what needed to be said to exactly the people who needed to hear it, and not a single unnecessary word more. He was mid-conversation with a shipping magnate from Busan when something made him stop. Not a sound. Not a movement. Just something. The particular shift in the air that happens when the universe is about to rearrange itself. He turned. And there she was. Ada Okonkwo, 5 years older and somehow even more herself, in a deep green Ankara dress that moved when she walked, natural hair pinned up with a few curls escaping at the temples, standing near the far side of the room with the posture of a woman who had learned, somewhere in the past 5 years, to take up space without apology. Jae-won's chest did something he did not immediately have a name for. But it was not Ada that stopped the world. It was the small boy standing beside her, one hand tucked into hers, eating a chin-chin from his other fist with the focused satisfaction of a child who has located the only thing worth caring about in a room full of adults. He was 4 years old, maybe 4.5. Brown skin warm as Ada's. Full lips curved in concentration. Small frame dressed in a little agbada that someone had clearly ironed with great love. And eyes. Dark, sharp, slightly narrow at the corners, set under strong brows. The exact eyes that Jae-won Kwon saw every morning in the mirror. The shipping magnate was still talking. Jae-won heard none of it. He was standing completely still in the middle of a moving, chattering, laughing room. And he was staring at a 4-year-old child who was eating chin-chin and carrying his face. Mr. Kwon. The magnate touched his arm. Are you all right? Excuse me, Jae-won said quietly. Something requires my attention. He did not move immediately. He stood, and he watched, because that was what Jae-won Kwon did. He observed before he acted. He watched Ada accept a glass of water from a waiter. He watched her speak to a woman beside her, warm and animated, the way Ada had always been, fully present in every conversation, giving all of herself to whoever was in front of her. He watched the boy finish his chin-chin, wipe his hand on his agbada, and look up at Ada and say something that made her laugh. And then the boy turned. As though he felt something. As though some biological radar that neither of them had asked for had activated without permission. He looked directly at Jae-won. And Jae-won looked back at his own eyes in a 4-year-old's face. Ada felt it. The way you feel when something shifts in a room without visible cause. She followed her son's gaze. And the blood left her face. If you are watching this story and you are not subscribed yet, please subscribe now and turn on your notification bell. This story is only going to get more intense from here, and you do not want to miss a single second. Jae-won began walking toward them. Unhurried. Deliberate. A man crossing a ballroom like he was crossing a chessboard, because that was exactly what he was doing. Ada's hand tightened around Ji-ho's. Her chin lifted. Her eyes did something complicated, fear and something that was not quite relief, pressed together. Jae-won stopped in front of her. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked down at the boy. The boy looked back up at him with zero fear and maximum curiosity. "Mummy," the boy said, in a voice that carried the particular confidence of a child who has never been told his observations are unwelcome. "Why does that man look like the photo you think I don't know about?" The silence that followed was enormous. Ada made a sound that was not quite a word. A waiter passed behind Jae-won with a tray of glasses. Someone across the room burst into laughter at a joke. The chandeliers sparkled. The world continued turning with the complete indifference it shows to moments that are shattering individual human beings. Jae-won crouched slowly, bringing himself to the boy's eye level, which was not something he had ever done for anyone in his professional life, and which he would later think about for a very long time. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was different, quieter than his boardroom voice. Careful. The boy considered whether this stranger deserved his name. Decided yes. "Ji-ho," he said. Then added generously, "But Grandma calls me Collard. You can pick." "Ji-ho," Jae-won repeated, as though testing the shape of it. As though this name, which was a Korean name, a name Ada had given their son without ever telling him, was the most significant word he had ever said aloud. He straightened slowly. He looked at Ada. Ada looked back at him. Her eyes were glossy. Her jaw was set. She was not going to cry. Not here. Not in front of all these people. Not in front of him. "We should find our seats," she said. Her voice barely shook. "Ji-ho, come." "Ada." Jae-won's voice was quiet. It stopped her the way a hand on the shoulder stops a person. Not forceful, just certain. "I will find you before this evening is over. You know I will." She did not respond. She walked away, Ji-ho's hand in hers, the boy looking back at Jae-won over his shoulder with those eyes, those impossible eyes, until the crowd swallowed them both. Jae-won stood where he was for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned and found Park. "I need everything you can find on Ada Okonkwo," he said. "Tonight. And I need to know who that child is registered to." Park's expression did not change. Of course. But something moved behind his eyes. Something small and quick, like a fish glimpsed beneath the surface of very still water. Gone before Jae-won could look directly at it. He filed it away. Jae-won Kwon filed everything away. He found her on the hotel terrace at 9:15. She was standing at the railing with a glass of water she had not touched, looking out at the lights of Lagos Island stretching into the dark. Ji-ho had been taken home an hour ago by Ada's cousin Ngozi, who had arrived to collect him with the energy of a woman who had received a phone call that something was wrong and intended to fix it with her bare hands. Ji-ho had waved goodbye to his mother and then looked around one more time, searching, Ada knew, for the man with the familiar eyes. He had not found him. She had been relieved and heartbroken in equal measure. She heard Jae-won's footsteps before she saw him. She had always been able to hear his footsteps. Even through a closed office door, she had always known when it was him. He came to stand beside her at the railing. Not too close. He looked out at the same water. They stood in silence for a moment, which was very Jae-won. He never filled silence out of discomfort. He waited until silence had said what it needed to say. "How old is he?" he said. Not a question. Jae-won. "Ada. How old is he?" She closed her eyes briefly. 4. He will be 5 in March. She heard the slow breath Jae-won took. Controlled. Measured. The breath of a man doing the arithmetic and not liking the answer, but refusing to let the answer make him lose his composure. "His name," Jae-won said. "You gave him a Korean name." Ada said nothing. "Ji-ho," Jae-won said quietly. "That is not a coincidence. That is not an accident. You named him Ji-ho and you taught him that name, and you have a photograph of me somewhere that a 4-year-old has found." He turned to look at her. "You loved me enough to give him my culture and not enough to tell me he existed." Ada turned to face him then, and the composure she had been holding together since the moment she saw him in that ballroom finally developed cracks at the edges. "You think I wanted this?" Her voice was low and fierce. "You think I wanted to raise him alone? You think I wanted to explain to a 3-year-old why his daddy doesn't come home? You think any of this was my choice? You left," Jae-won said. 5 years ago. You left without a word. I left because I was told to leave." The words came out louder than she intended. She pulled them back, looked around, lowered her voice. "I was told that if I stayed, my child would not survive long enough to be born. Do you understand what I am saying to you? Someone came to me and told me that my pregnancy made me a target. That your enemies would use my baby, your baby, as a weapon against you. And that the safest thing I could do for everyone including you, was to disappear. Jae-won was very still. Who told you this? Your man. Park Sung-jin. She watched his face. He came to my apartment. He brought money. He had already arranged the paperwork. He said it was the only way to protect the child. He said you had approved it. She stopped. He said you knew and that this was your decision. Silence. Jae-won's jaw moved once. Just once. I did not know, he said. I did not approve anything. I never knew you were pregnant. He paused. Ada. I did not know. She stared at him. And in her eyes was the complicated process of a woman who has built an entire architecture of understanding around a lie, and is now watching it dismantle itself brick by brick. He told me you knew, she said. Her voice was smaller now. Not weak. Just smaller. He told me you had decided it was better this way. That a child would complicate your operation. That you were not. She stopped. That I was not what? Jae-won's voice was very quiet. That you were not the kind of man who stayed. Jae-won looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked away, out at the water. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Not softer exactly, but stripped of its usual armor. 5 years ago, he said. That was probably true. 5 years ago, Park was probably right about what I would have done. He was quiet for a moment. But he did not give me the chance to be wrong about myself. And he did not give you the choice to decide that for yourself. He decided for both of us. He turned back to her. Why are you still in Lagos? After all this time. Ada hesitated. And in that hesitation, Jae-won read something. Because you could not leave, he said slowly. Someone made sure you could not leave. Her silence was its own answer. Tell me everything, he said. Not a command. Not a plea. Something between them, the voice of a man asking for a truth he already suspects will enrage him. And so she told him. After she had disappeared from Jae-won's life. Terrified, pregnant, alone. A man had found her 3 months later in Port Harcourt, where she had gone to stay with a distant relative. His name was Emeka Cho. Nigerian mother, Korean father. The kind of man who presented himself as a solution and collected debts later. He knew about her. He knew about the baby. He had presented himself as someone sent to keep her safe. She had believed him, because she was 3 months pregnant, afraid, and had no one else. He had set her up in Lagos, a decent apartment, a job reference, a school for Jiho later. He had a man named Silvio who appeared once a month, asking gentle questions. How was Jiho? What school did he attend? Who were their friends? Ada had thought it was concern. It had taken her 2 years to understand it was surveillance. By then, Jiho was walking and talking and had his father's way of tilting his head when he was thinking about something. By then, Ada had built a small life, a job at a consulting firm, a routine, a community of women who looked after each other's children and cooked for each other on Sundays. By then, leaving again felt like destroying the only stability her son had ever known. So she stayed. And Emeka Cho's people watched. And Jiho grew. And every month that passed, Ada understood a little more clearly that she was not protected. She was stored. When she finished speaking, Jae-won had not moved. He was looking at her with the focused, dangerous calm of a man sorting through information and arriving at conclusions. Emeka Cho, he said. You know him. I know of his family. Korean-Nigerian. They have been trying to establish a foothold in Lagos for years. He paused. They have been watching my son for 4 years. They know who he is. They have been waiting for the moment to use that information. His voice was almost conversational. My own man sent you to them. Park delivered you and the boy directly into their hands and then came back to work in my office for 5 years. He straightened his jacket. I see. Ada wrapped her arms around herself. What are you going to do? He looked at her steadily. I am going to correct every mistake that was made. Starting tonight. He turned to go. Then stopped. Turned back. And said. And this was the most un-Jae-won thing. The crack in the composure. The very human thing she had not expected. Ada. I am sorry. That you carried this alone. That no one protected you. That I was not there. He said it quickly, almost uncomfortably, the way people say the truest things. Fast, before fear can stop them. I am sorry. She did not say anything. She pressed her lips together and nodded once. He walked back inside. She stood at the railing for a long time after, breathing the night air, trying to decide what she felt. And what she felt, buried under the fear and the exhaustion and the careful walls she had built, what she felt was something she recognized from 5 years ago. Something she had never quite managed to stop feeling, no matter how sensible it would have been. She felt hope. And she was terrified of it. If this story has you gripped and you have not yet liked this video, please tap that like button right now. It helps this channel more than you know, and this story is far from over. Meanwhile, back in his car, Jae-won was on the phone to Geo, his most trusted operative, a man he had brought from Seoul 8 years ago and who had never once given him a reason to doubt him. Park Sung-jin, Jae-won said, without preamble. I need his communication records for the past 5 years. Every encrypted channel. Every financial transaction. I need it by morning. Understood. Geo paused. Is there a problem? Yes, Jae-won said. There is a significant problem. And I have been sitting next to it for 5 years without knowing it was there. He looked out the window at Lagos passing by. The chaos and the color and the life of this city that was somehow, inexplicably, home now. Geo. I have a son. Silence on the line. Then. I see. Congratulations. Don Kwon. I will have the records by morning. Jae-won almost, smiled. That night, the records came through at 2 a.m. Jae-won sat at his desk, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, and he read through 5 years of betrayal with the steady, cold attention of a surgeon examining damage. Park Sung-jin had been on the Cho Network's payroll for 6 years. 1 year before he had sent Ada away, 5 years after. The payments were routed through 3 shell companies and had become more frequent and more substantial in the past 18 months. The reason for the escalation was visible in the emails. The Cho Network had identified Ji-ho. They had confirmed paternity through photographs and had been building a case for how to deploy the information most effectively. The plan, as far as Jae-won could piece it together, was elegant in a way that made him respect and despise it simultaneously. They would approach him, when the time was right, with evidence of his heir. They would offer to return the boy and Ada in exchange for a merger of operations. Jae-won would absorb the Cho Network under duress, giving them legitimacy, access, and the protection of the Kwon name. The empire Jae-won had built would become, partially, theirs. His son was going to be used as a key to unlock everything Jae-won had spent 12 years building. Jae-won closed the laptop. He sat in the dark for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and sent 2 words to Geo. Begin tomorrow. Ada's apartment was modest and warm in the way of a woman who had learned to make home out of limited resources. Bright Ankara cushions on a second-hand sofa, Ji-ho's drawings covering one entire wall in a gallery of cheerful chaos, the smell of something cooked earlier still in the air. Jae-won arrived at 8 in the morning and stood in the doorway trying to remember the last time he had been somewhere that felt like this. Ji-ho was at the kitchen table eating oji with the focused energy of someone fueling up for important business. He saw Jae-won in the doorway and stopped eating. He stared. Jae-won stared back. You came, Ji-ho said. Matter of fact. As though he had been expecting this. I came, Jae-won said. Ji-ho considered this, then looked at Ada, who was standing at the counter with her arms crossed and an expression that was trying to be careful and neutral and was succeeding at neither. Mummy, Ji-ho said, the man with my eyes came for breakfast. Did you make enough? Ada made a sound that was very close to a laugh. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Go finish your food, Ji-ho. Ji-ho returned to his oji, satisfied that the situation was in hand. Jae-won and Ada sat at the small dining table while Ji-ho ate, and Jae-won told her quietly, efficiently, what he had found. The records. The plan. The full shape of what Park and the Cho network had intended. Ada listened without interrupting, and as he spoke, the last traces of uncertainty on her face resolved into something harder and clearer. They were going to use him, she said, when he finished. Not a question. They were going to use him, Jae-won confirmed. Ada looked at Ji-ho. Ji-ho had finished his OG and was now drawing something on a piece of paper with the solemnity of a child engaged in serious artistic work. He looked up, caught his mother's eyes, and gave her a thumbs up for no apparent reason. Ada's expression did something painful and tender and fierce all at once. Nobody uses my son, she said. Quietly. Absolutely. No, Jae-won agreed. They do not. He looked at Ji-ho too. The boy had gone back to his drawing, tongue out slightly, pen moving with great concentration. A small person who had been a target since before he could walk, and who had no idea, and who was drawing what appeared to be a car on fire, which Jae-won decided not to examine too closely. Ji-ho, Jae-won said. The boy looked up. What are you drawing? Ji-ho turned the paper around to show him. It was, in fact, a car on fire, with a very small figure standing next to it looking unbothered. This is my action movie, Ji-ho said. The man survived because he is the main character. Main characters always survive. Jae-won looked at the drawing for a moment. Is the man you? Ji-ho thought about it. It can be you if you want. You look like you do action movies. Something moved through Jae-won's chest, swift and warm and entirely unfamiliar. He nodded seriously. I accept. Ji-ho handed him the drawing. Jae-won took it with both hands, Korean style, the same way he accepted documents of great importance, because this was a document of great importance. Ji-ho observed this and appeared satisfied. Ada, watching this exchange, looked away quickly and found something very interesting to look at on the ceiling. By noon, the trap for Park was set. Jae-won called him into a meeting under the pretense of a shipment rerouting issue. Routine, undramatic, the kind of meeting they had had 100 times. He gave Park false information, that Ada had been confirmed as unrelated to him, that the child's paternity was unclear, that he had no further interest in investigating. He watched Park's face. The relief was almost invisible. Almost. A microscopic relaxation around the eyes. A fraction of a second where Park's shoulders dropped the tension they had been carrying. Jae-won saw it. He saw everything. You seem relieved, Jae-won said pleasantly. Park met his eyes without flinching. Just glad it won't complicate operations, Don Kwon. Of course, Jae-won said. That is all any of us want. No complications. He smiled. Thank you, Park. You have been such a reliable presence in this organization. I want you to know I am grateful. Park smiled back. It was a very good smile. Practiced. Safe. After he left, Jae-won looked at Ji-ho, who had been standing in the corner with a recording device and 5 years of financial evidence already prepared. Bring him back in an hour, Jae-won said. With the documents on the table. The look on Park Sung-jin's face when he walked into that room an hour later, when he saw the records, the photographs, the transaction logs, the emails he had thought were buried beyond recovery, was the first time Jae-won had seen Park lose his composure entirely. All the smooth professionalism dropped at once, like a coat falling off a hook. What was underneath was not remorse. It was calculation, a man rapidly running the numbers on whether there was still an exit. There was not. You sent her to them, Jae-won said. Each word measured. Separate. You sent the mother of my child directly into the hands of the people who would use them against me. And then you came back to this office and you handed me reports and sat in my meetings and attended my dinners and you smiled at me, Park, every single day for 5 years. Park tried once more. I was protecting the organization. You were protecting your investment. Jae-won's voice was very quiet now. The quiet that people who worked for him had learned to fear more than any shouting. "Remove him," he said to Gio. Quietly. Completely. It was done by 3 in the afternoon. The meeting with Emeka Cho was arranged for the following evening, neutral territory, a private dining room at a hotel on Admiralty Way. Jae-won arrived alone, which was either confidence or provocation, depending on how you looked at it. Cho arrived with 2 associates and an expression of a man who believed he still held the better hand. He did not. Jae-won sat across from him and placed a folder on the table. Inside was everything: the surveillance records, the communications with Park, the financial flows, the documented plan to use Ji-ho as leverage. "I am a reasonable man," Jae-won said. "Which is why I am sitting here having a conversation rather than doing what I am also capable of doing." He let that settle. "You have 3 days to withdraw every resource you have placed around Ada Okonkwo and my son. Every contact. Every surveillance. Every account. You will sign a documented agreement to have no further engagement with my family. And you will do this cheerfully, because the alternative is that everything in this folder becomes public knowledge in every circle that matters to your business." Emeka Cho was quiet for a moment. He was a smart man, smart enough to see when a game was over. "You have made your position very clear, Mr. Kwon." "I have," Jae-won agreed. "Do we understand each other?" A pause. Then, "We understand each other." Jae-won stood, buttoned his jacket, and left without touching the food. It was over. All of it, dismantled in 48 hours with the efficiency of a man who had spent 12 years learning that every problem has a solution if you are willing to be the most prepared person in the room. But the thing about solving external problems is that they are always easier than the problems inside a room where someone you hurt is sitting across from you, waiting to see who you actually are. That evening, Jae-won went back to Ada's apartment. She was in the living room, Ji-ho long in bed. She had made tea she was not drinking. She looked up when he knocked and let him in without a word. They sat across from each other in her small, warm, Ankara-cushioned living room, and Jae-won said, "It is done. Park has been removed. Cho will withdraw. You are both free." Ada nodded. She looked at her tea. "Ada." She looked up. "I know I cannot. I know I have no right to walk back into your life and demand a place in it because I have resolved a situation that should never have happened." He stopped. Started again. "I know you have built something here. On your own. You have made a home and raised a person who is extraordinary. And you did that without me. Without anyone." He paused. "I know I have no claim on that." Ada said nothing. But she was listening. He could tell she was listening because she had gone very still in the particular way she used to go still in his office when he was saying something she was actually absorbing rather than just hearing. "But I would like," he continued, "to be present. For Ji-ho. And, if you will consider it, for you. Not as a demand. Not as something I am owed. But because I have spent 5 years in an office with no cactus and no post-it notes and no one who makes me eat before 2 p.m., and it turns out that a man can run an empire and still be," he searched for the word, "empty. Without knowing why." Ada stared at him. Her eyes were doing the thing they always did when she was trying not to feel something, blinking more than necessary, focused very carefully on a neutral point. "You are telling me," she said slowly, "that you missed my post-it notes. I am telling you considerably more than that. But the post-it notes are part of it. They are part of it, yes." She pressed her lips together, looked down, then up again. "Jae-won, I need you to understand something. I am not the same woman who sat in your office for 2 years and translated your moods for your entire staff. I have had to be someone harder, someone more careful." She paused. "I cannot afford to trust quickly. Not even you. Maybe especially not you." "I know," he said. "I am not asking for quickly. I am asking for the chance." He looked at her steadily. "The chance to show Ji-ho who his father is. The chance to show you who I am trying to become. That is all." Silence. Then Ada said, "He asked about you. This morning, when I put him to bed, he asked if the man with his eyes was going to come back. Jae-won was quiet. I told him I didn't know, Ada said. Then tell him, Jae-won said, that yes, he is coming back. He is not going anywhere. The wall in Ada's expression moved. Not collapsed. Shifted. The way a door moves when it is very carefully, very slowly, beginning to open. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said very quietly, he likes football and Peppa Pig, and he is learning Korean words from a children's app, and he pronounces them terribly, and he is so proud of himself. Jae-won breathed. Tell me all of it. And she did. They talked for 3 hours. Ada talking and Jae-won listening in the intent, total way he had always listened to her, making her feel, as she had always felt in his presence, that she was the most important source of information in the room. She told him about Ji-ho's first word, which was no, about the way he cried at his first birthday because the candle going out frightened him, about how he had once very seriously attempted to negotiate his bedtime by presenting a written argument on the back of a receipt. Jae-won listened to all of it with the expression of a man discovering that there is an entire country he did not know existed, and that he has somehow already been made its citizen. At 11 p.m., a sound came from the hallway. Small footsteps. A door creaking. Ji-ho appeared in the living room doorway in his Spider-Man pajamas, blanket dragging behind him, eyes squinting at the light. He saw Jae-won. He stopped squinting. You came back, Ji-ho said. I came back, Jae-won said. Ji-ho looked at his mother. She nodded slightly. He looked back at Jae-won and then crossed the room and, with the gravity of a child making a significant decision, climbed onto the sofa next to him. He arranged his blanket. He leaned against Jae-won's arm. Jae-won sat very still, as though any movement might break something. You can put your arm here, Ji-ho said, pointing to his own small shoulder. That is where arms go. Jae-won put his arm there. Ji-ho settled. You smell like Mummy's description, he said sleepily. What was the description? She said you smell like something serious. He yawned. I think serious smells okay. Jae-won looked across at Ada. She had her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were wet. She was shaking her head slowly. At this child, at this moment, at the absurdity and the tenderness of it. Jae-won held his son and felt something he had been calling weakness for 34 years reveal itself, finally, for what it actually was. Not weakness. Never weakness. The foundation everything else was supposed to be built on. 3 weeks later, in a hall full of the most serious, dangerous, carefully composed men in his organization, Jae-won Kwon stood and said, I want to introduce my son, Kwon Ji-ho Kalad, who is 4 years old, and who has informed me that this organization needs better snacks at meetings. Ji-ho, standing beside him in a tiny suit that matched his father's, surveyed the room of serious men with the air of someone who found them adequately impressive but not overwhelming. One of the oldest men in the room, a silver-haired Nigerian associate who had known Jae-won for a decade, stood and bowed toward the boy. Ji-ho bowed back. Perfect form. Then looked at his father and whispered, I did it right? You did it perfectly, Jae-won whispered back. 2 weeks after that, in Ada's mother's compound in Enugu, a celebration spread across 3 hours and 4 different types of music. Neighbors arriving with food, children running between the legs of adults, lanterns going up as evening fell. Kwon Ji-ho Kalad was properly named before both worlds, Korean and Nigerian, in a ceremony that had never been done before and would be talked about for years. Jae-won sat at a table surrounded by Ada's aunties, who had spent the first hour interrogating him in rotating shifts and were now, having determined he was at minimum acceptable, pressing food on him with the competitive generosity of women who believe feeding a person is a form of claiming them. Eat this one, Auntie Chioma said, placing a third piece of fish on his plate. I already have. Eat. He ate. Ada appeared beside him, trying not to laugh. You have passed the test, she said quietly. Auntie Chioma only feeds people she has decided to keep. Jae-won looked at the aunties, who were now debating amongst themselves whether he needed more rice. Is there any possibility of? No, Ada said. There is no possibility. Just eat. He ate. And the strangest thing, the thing he would not have been able to explain to the version of himself from 5 years ago, the version that had a gun on a table and no photographs and an office that felt like a vault, the strangest thing was that he did not want to be anywhere else. Ji-ho ran past, chasing a bowl and laughing at a volume that suggested he had been entirely too much sugar. He spotted his father, redirected, and crashed into Jae-won's side with the full-body commitment of a child who has decided someone is safe. Daddy, come play. Jae-won looked down at him. At the bright eyes. At the Korean-Nigerian face that had been carrying the weight of a secret war since before it could speak, and that now was simply and completely a child's face, lit up and demanding. 1 minute, Jae-won said. You always say 1 minute. I am coming. Ji-ho grabbed his hand with both of his and began pulling. Jae-won allowed himself to be pulled. He looked back at Ada over his shoulder. She was watching him with an expression he recognized from years ago, from late evenings in the office when she thought he wasn't paying attention. An expression that meant something she hadn't said yet. He raised an eyebrow. A question. She shook her head slightly. Not yet. But there was something in her eyes that was not nothing. That was, in fact, the quiet beginning of something. Careful and real and chosen. Not fallen into, not accidental, but decided. The way the most important things are decided. Slowly. With both eyes open. Jae-won turned back to his son, who was still pulling, still laughing, still absolutely certain that his father was coming. And Jae-won Kwon, who had never run from anything in his life except this, followed. The narrator closes softly, over the sound of the party, over the music and the laughter and Ji-ho's voice calling out across the compound. They said the most dangerous men in the world have one fatal weakness. They were right. But they were wrong about what weakness means. Because the thing that cracked Jae-won Kwon open, the thing that got through every wall and every calculation and every carefully constructed defense, was not a weapon. It was a 4-year-old boy in Spider-Man pajamas who told him that Sirius smells okay. And a woman who, after everything, chose to let a door open. Not all the way. Not yet. But enough to let the light in. And sometimes enough is everything. If you made it to the end of this story, you are exactly the kind of viewer this channel was built for. Please subscribe, drop a comment telling us what your favorite moment was. Was it Ji-ho and the post-it notes, or Jae-won eating fish under Auntie Chioma's supervision? And share this video with someone who loves a good story. More is coming. Do not miss it.